Alrighty, I think we can go ahead and jump in. So thanks again for joining our webinar today, everyone. Why QuickBooks users are making the switch to Sage Intacct. Today, we'll do a brief introduction and overview. Then I'm actually going to do a live demo of Intacct and some of the efficiencies gained with Intacct, including multi-entity capabilities, some automation, audit trails, and a couple of other topics. My name is Jane Brown. I'm the consulting manager at CBiz, and I lead up a team of consultants that implement Intacct in various industries, so nonprofit, construction, financial services, among others. And just a little bit about CBiz. We are a trusted Sage partner. A couple of our accolades below are we're one of Bob Scott's 2024 top 100 VARs. We were part of the 2023 VAR Stars, Accounting Today VAR 100. So just a couple of accolades there before I jump into the demo. Okay, let me go ahead and stop share there, and I will reshare my environment. And I'm going to go ahead and turn my camera off just for the presentation piece. Alrighty, so give that a second, make sure everybody can see it, and we'll jump in. Alrighty, so, let's see here. Michelle or Kayla, can you confirm that you're looking at Intacct on the screen share as opposed to?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Awesome. Thank you so much. So what we're looking at here is an Intacct home screen. Throughout today's demo, I'm going to be navigating through a couple of items in what's called the application picker here in the top left. Specific topics we'll be covering today are multi-entity and consolidations, some of the inter-entity efficiencies gained with Intacct. We'll be talking a little bit about real-time reporting and dashboards. We'll talk a little bit about automation of some of your key financial processes. We'll briefly touch on integrations, and if I have time, I'm going to show one piece of what's called the advanced CRM integration that connects Salesforce to Intacct, and then we'll briefly cover audit trail and compliance. So to start out, we'll get into multi-entity and consolidations. So within Intacct right now, I'm in a multi-entity environment, and I'm at the top level. So if I click this top level picker, I have an option to drill into the top level. I also can see my 3 entities within this particular environment. If I'm at the top level and I'm viewing reporting or I'm creating a transaction, I have the ability to view and record transactions into any one of these particular entities. Now, if I'm someone with top level access and I want to access a specific entity, like entity 1, I simply click that entity from that entity picker at the top, and it takes me into entity 1. And so now I'm transacting within this specific entity. As far as entities go, the process for adding them is relatively easy within Intacct. So we'll see I've got 3 entities here. If I did want to add another entity, it's as simple as coming in and adding that entity, plugging in my federal tax ID, saving. And now this entity is a part of my organizational structure. And I'm also going to see that now I can drill into that entity 8 that I just created. So very simple process for creating entities. A couple of features or efficiencies gained here are we're able to all log into this single environment and still have access to our entities within that single environment. So I'm not having to log in to entity 1, create a separate login for entity 2, entity 3, so on and so forth. We also have the ability with this multi-entity structure to close and open books either for the holistic organization or for a specific entity. So you'll see when I come into the general ledger and I want to close books, I can just go ahead and close through whichever period I select, or I can say, maybe I just want to close books for entity 1. Maybe I just want to close books for entity 2. I have the ability to close books by entity if I need to do that. And that same functionality exists in subledgers. So I can come into my AP subledger. If I have a staggered close where I close AP on workday 2 or 3, Could come in, maybe only entity one's AP is ready to be closed. I can close that here. The other thing to point out here is that not only are we able to have entities in our Intacct environment, if we need them, we can also add locations. So what I mean by that is if I come into my company, setup, locations, I'm going to see in this particular environment, I have a couple of children locations, New York and Boston, that all roll up to my entity one. Same deal down here, Dallas and San Francisco, they all roll up to entity two. So if I wanted to see a holistic view of what my organizational structure looks like, I could come out to this consolidation section, and we're gonna go through the consolidations process in a second. We'll click organizational view, and here I'm seeing that I've got my overall top level container of CBiz. Underneath that, I've got my entities, entity 1, 2, and 3. Entity 1 and 2 both have some children locations down here. So let's take a look here at a dashboard and what some of the top level reporting that encompasses all of our entities looks like. So I'm going to come out to this controller dashboard here. And what I'm seeing is what maybe a controller would want to see when they log into Intacct for the first time in their day. They may want to see some performance cards, some reports. We'll go over those in more detail in a second. But what I want to point out is at this point, this is a holistic view of the organization. If this controller were to drill into entity one from that dashboard page, they're actually going to be taken into that same exact dashboard, except now it's just for entity one. So that's one way they can drill into those entities. We can also add filters to these dashboards. So I could come into here and say, I actually, instead of seeing all locations, I just want to see the same exact activity for entity two. I can go ahead and utilize this filter up here. We'll see some of these numbers are dropping. That's because we've now filtered by entity two. So this is what reporting looks like from the perspective of someone who has top level access to all entities. From a transactional perspective, it's important to see what that looks like as well. If I come into a journal entry, for example, and I just want to add a general journal, if I'm at this top level, I'm going to have the ability to code this transaction to any of my three entities, entity 1, 2, 3. So if I needed to make a reclass maybe from entity 1 to entity 3 in a journal entry, if I'm someone with top level access, I can do that. I can create a transaction that hits both of those entities. The other thing to point out with this top level access before we jump into some of the entity level specifics is that we can also create shared charts of accounts across our entities, shared vendor lists, shared customer lists. But if you need to, in the case of customers and vendors, you can actually come in, create this at the top level so that it's usable by all entities, but maybe there is a specific entity that you don't want to see this vendor for whatever purpose. You can actually come in and say, I just want entity 1 and entity 3 to be able to see this vendor. Now, if there's someone who only has access to entity 2, they will not be able to see this Massachusetts Department of Revenue. So let's go ahead and take a look at what that sort of restricted view looks like if someone maybe only has access to one of these entities. So we'll jump away from that controller perspective and jump into another person's perspective. So if I come into my users here, I actually have the ability to restrict any of my users to specific entities. So in this case, we've got Robert. He's one of our warehouse employees, and he is restricted to entity 1. So if we take a look at what this looks like when Robert logs in, let me pull up the login from his perspective. So Robert's going to come in. He'll log into his Intacct environment. And instead of seeing that top level selector that we saw from the controller's perspective, we're just seeing entity 1. That's because we have restricted Robert to that specific entity. The same way that the controller could see all of the entities when he or she transacted, from Robert's perspective, if I come in and try to create something like a purchase order, for example, and I take a look at my location selector, I'm only going to see entity one, and if there are locations that roll up to entity one, I'll also see those locations here. But I will not see entity two. I will not see entity three. I don't have that same sort of top level access that the controller does. So just to recap what we've gone over so far, that top level access within Intacct is for someone like a controller or CFO who needs to see that holistic view. We can add shared charts of accounts, vendors, customers. We have the ability to restrict those vendors and customers to specific entities if we need to. A couple other benefits with this multi-entity structure are auto eliminations and consolidations and inter-entity transactions, which is how we'll wrap this section. So we already took a look at our organizational view here, where we've got our CBiz org with our entities that roll up to it, with our locations that roll up to that. If we take a look at how consolidation works, we're actually going to look at one of our books we've created. So if you're utilizing consolidations in Intacct, you'll create what are called books. And within these books, a couple of important things to note is we're saying which entities do we want to consolidate within these particular books, and what are we eliminating? Which due to, due froms, and intercompany payable receivables are we eliminating? So once we set up this book, we have the ability to run consolidations. And the process of running consolidations is pretty simple. In our demo environment here, this is indicating that January and February have already been run. And we're going to see throughout the demo today that audit trail comes up and compliance and records come up. So this is one instance where we can see who ran this elimination or who ran this consolidation and the date and time that they ran it. So we can hover over any of these, click into them, and then see that history. If we wanted to run a consolidation for another period like March, it's as simple as coming in, selecting that period, and clicking consolidate to run it. We also have the ability to create recurrences of consolidation runnings. So we don't necessarily need to manually come in here and consolidate each month. We could set up a schedule if we need to. And then once we've run those consolidations, let's take a look at our first example of a report here. And we'll see what our consolidated result looks like. So I'm going to start by looking at this consolidated balance sheet. And I'll click run here, and we'll talk reporting in the next section. So we'll get into more detail around how those features work. But just to take a look at the consolidation perspective here, we've got our three entities. We have a summation column, but we also have this elimination column, which is taking all of those elimination accounts that I identified within my book and fully eliminating them. So we've got our intercompany receivable coming out, our intercompany payable coming out. So we're not running reports to identify those amounts. Instead, we're able to identify them in the books and then just run those consolidations at the end of each month or however often we need to run them. Just to get one more, sorry about that. Just to get one more look at reporting around consolidations, let me run this consolidated P&L. We won't see eliminations here, but it'll still be useful to see how we can consolidate financial information. So if I take a look here, I've got my three entities. I have my total locations in the rightmost column. And this is just showing me for every single entity, what are my revenue, what are my expenses, and then what's my summation at the end. So no eliminations, but still good to see that we can run that consolidated reporting. And then the final piece I'll cover here in consolidations and inter-entity is an actual inter-entity transaction, just so we can take a look at how this looks. So since we do have the ability to code transactions to any entity, we may have an instance where we need to create an inter-entity transaction. So I have an example of that here, where I have an inter-entity bill. So I've got a bill for the Massachusetts Department of Revenue. It's for entity one. But when I paid this bill, I actually utilized a bank account owned by entity two. So I came in here and said, I want to use this SVB account. It's a bank account that belongs to entity two. Anytime you create a transaction like that, or anytime you create an inter-entity transaction in Intacct, period, the details of the transaction will obviously post, but what we'll also post is an inter-entity journal. So the system recognized that we paid a bill owned by entity 1 with a bank account owned by entity 2. And because of that, it automatically generated this transaction we're seeing in this inter-entity journal. One more example of this, just to nail this down, is this inter-entity reclass. So let's say you're making a simple reclass travel expenses into entity 1 out of entity 2. Again, this piece of this is completely automated. It's an inter-entity entry that's generated based on how we've set up your inter-entity mappings, which we do as part of your implementation. So if I come into here and look at my inter-entity mappings, I can see that every entity is going to have a relationship and it's going to have respective receivable payable accounts. So I've got my entity 1, entity 2 relationship and the 4 inter-entity receivable payable accounts that are associated with that. And I would want to add this combination for every single inter-entity relationship that I have. Great. Okay. Let me jump into my next section here. And we will save some time at the end for questions. So we'll briefly touch on reporting in more detail than we did in the entity section. So one of the big benefits of Intacct is real-time reporting and dashboards. So a lot of the folks that utilize Intacct start their day in a dashboard, like this controller dashboard that we looked at just a second ago. Going into some details on this dashboard, so what we're seeing at the top here are called performance cards. So these are just snapshots of financial information within my organization. Again, these are real time. So if someone posted an entry in the background, all I would have to do is refresh and those numbers would appear as part of my performance cards here. All of these performance cards and really any number you're seeing on a dashboard is drillable. So I can take this 196,439 in OpEx, I can drill into it, and I can now see a report of OpEx that makes up that amount. But then even further than that, I can actually drill into an amount like this 5,300. This will take me to a general ledger report that makes up that 5,300. And then finally, I can actually drill all the way into that original source AP bill. So I can come into here, and this is going to take me all the way out to the bill that included that $3,000 in rent that I just drilled into. And again, just as a reminder, because there were a bunch of clicks there, we came all the way from this high level OpEx and drilled all the way into an AP bill that was part of that rent expense. That's performance cards, and you'll see indicators here of green and red depending on whether the results compared to a prior period are good or bad. We can also pull reports into dashboards. So here we've got a P&L. We're going to dig into this in a bit more detail in a second. We've also got a balance sheet on here. You can also pull in charts and graphs. I don't have any on this specific dashboard, but bar graphs, pie charts, donut, any kind of graph or chart you can think of. Approvals all the way to the left here. If I am an approver, like if I'm a controller that approves payments, for example, I can create quick links to that so that I don't have to drill through my menu options to get there. And then quick links to reports are another option. So here I'm seeing some reports I might use on a day-to-day basis. And then also some non-financial reports. So top 10 AP balances, for example, is something I can pull into a dashboard. Another feature I want to bring up that provides some efficiencies is Collaborate. So I'll see on this dashboard, I have a link to all of my Collaborate messages. Collaborate is a way that we can communicate instead of using Teams or Slack or whatever system your team uses to communicate outside of Intacct. You can actually communicate within the app. So what I mean by that is I can see in my dashboard a link of all messages that have been sent to me. And Kayla asked me to approve coding. I can click into this, and then this is actually going to take me to the transaction where she tagged me. So she tagged me down here and said, I need to approve the coding on this invoice. So this is just a way, instead of reaching out to your folks on Slack and saying, hey, can you look at invoice 1234? You actually have the ability to tag them in these invoices or journal entries, any transaction, and notify them that they need to take a look at something. Dashboards, last thing I'll say on dashboards is that they are configurable by role. So you could give users information they need to make decisions in their specific area of influence. What I mean by that is Maybe you create a department manager dashboard and all of your department managers have access to that. Maybe you create operations dashboards for your sales folks, for your purchasing folks. You can create as many of these as you want. You can organize them however you'd like, and then you can decide which folks can view which dashboards. We'll jump into reporting now. So I'm going to look at this P&L, and if I'm someone who has the proper access, I actually have the ability to click edit directly from a dashboard and edit my report from here. What I'm looking at here is what's called the financial report writer. So if I come in here and preview this, this is going to show me what this report looked like on that specific dashboard. And it's a little ugly at the moment. So let's say maybe we don't like the way that this revenue is broken out by entity. Maybe we want to come into the rows of this report, and instead of expanding this by dimension, because at the moment it's expanded by my location/entity dimension, maybe I just want to summarize it. And maybe the columns were a bit complicated as well. Maybe instead of expanding those by the items we sell, maybe instead I want to see what this looks like summarized as well. I can easily come into the rows and columns of my financial report writer and make those edits to make things as summarized or as granular as I'd like. The previous version of this, though, was showing how we can expand by dimension. So in Intacct, you're going to have a variety of dimensions available to you: department, entity, customer, vendor, employee, item. You can utilize any of those dimensions on any row or column of a report. So the same way I had previously expanded revenue by entity, I could actually come in and say, no, I want to see department on my rows instead of entity. Let's take a look at what this looks like. Come in, and now I can see that 12.231 in revenue in my rows. The other great feature is I have the ability to expand by multiple dimensions. So as we saw previously, I can actually say, maybe I want to see my locations on my rows, and instead I want to see on my columns the items that we're selling, for example. And that's that view we saw previously, but just to highlight that we can actually break these reports down by multiple dimensions. That's the efficiency that those dimensions and the Intacct reporting kind of gives us. So now we're seeing our entities along my rows, and now every single item we sell along the columns with a summation at the end there. A couple other features that I'll call out before we jump to anything else. So again, the concept of audit trails comes up when we look at reports. What I mean by that is I can actually come into the top right of this financial report writer editor, and I can say view audit trail. This is going to show me every single action that has been taken on this particular report, including folks who have jumped in and made no modifications, people who have printed or exported the reports. That's all going to be available in that audit trail. And again, we'll see that concept come up over and over again. And then version history. This is a great recent feature in Intacct where this will actually save a version of every single, it'll save a version of every single version of this report, and we can actually go back and restore these. So right now I'm in the current version, but let's say I accidentally save changes that I did not intend to save. I can click view, and then I'm going to be able to view this version of the report, and then you'll see up here that I have a restore button. So I have the ability to restore old versions in case I accidentally make changes I did not intend to. The other thing I'll mention before jumping into another section, back into this report writer, it's just that I have a lot of flexibility with these reports, so I can add whatever filters I need to. If I want to prompt departments so that when someone runs this, they have to filter by a department, I can certainly do that. I have full control over my formatting, so everything from the formatting of my negative numbers to the font of my reports to the margins of my reports, I have the ability to control all of that. And then last thing I'll mention on reports is that you get about 40 canned reports with Intacct as a starting point, but you can very easily take those reports and duplicate them and then make changes to those duplicated versions without messing up those original versions. So any of our reports, and I'll come out to my report center just to show you this to wrap. My report center is my one-stop shop for any reporting in Intacct, so I don't need to navigate out to my menus. From here, I can see financial reports, GL reports, AP reports, any report I'd like to see. And I have the ability to edit from here and duplicate them as needed and create additional versions of them. Alrighty, we will jump into automation next, just to talk through a couple of the automation features within Intacct. So let me go ahead and jump into another environment. Alrighty. So one of the cool features of Intacct and something that allows for additional automation is what are called billing templates. So billing templates allow us to capture complex arrangements that we might have with customers. We'll take a look at one of these billing templates here. So we'll look at this quarterly billing template. What this is we're saying with this particular contract, we want to, at 0 months, so the start date of the contract, bill 12.5% of the total contract. Then maybe 3 months out, we want to bill another 12.5. Maybe 6 months out, another 12.5. This is meant to speed up that billing process so that we're not having to manually create those invoices throughout the life of the contract. Instead, at the start of it, we can set up a template that allows us to speed up that process. There's also usage-based billing and contracts and a lot of features around the contracts module that we can certainly answer questions for you if you have them, but just wanted to show that this is one huge piece of automation within Intacct. Kind of along those lines, we also have the ability to automate revenue recognition within Intacct. So if I come into my original environment here, open this up. So we've also got the ability to create what are called revenue recognition templates. So let's take a look at a couple examples of these. So in this case, what I'm looking at is a RevRec template for a straight line contract. So I'm able to say, I want revenue for this particular contract to be recognized monthly at the end of each month, and I want this to be spread across the contract term. So we can actually utilize these templates again. Instead of having to manually create revenue recognition journals, we can assign these at the point of initial entry and then have the system create those revenue recognition entries throughout the life of the contract. One other piece of automation here around revenue recognition is our ability to actually recognize revenue based on the percentage of a project that's complete. So within Intacct, there's an entire projects module that you can add. And the way that this particular RevRec template is set up is it says, as we mark a project as 25% complete, as 50% complete, as we continue to chip away at the project, at the end of each month, the system will automatically recognize the revenue related to that percentage of the project that was complete. So billing templates, RevRec templates, those are huge pieces of automation within Intacct. A couple of other items I want to call out around automation are approvals. So a lot of folks that are considering moving to Intacct, or a lot of folks that are currently using Intacct, previously had trouble around department manager approvals specifically. So they were having to chase down department managers and ask for approvals on purchasing. Within Intacct, in both the accounts payable module and the purchasing module, depending on what your organization needs, there's the ability to set up department manager approvals. So what I mean by that is I can come down to my bill approvals here in this demo environment, and I can see that I've actually set this up with department manager approvals. And that if I look here in my department 100 sales, these approvals are routing to Emma. And I can also set up tiers here. So let's say in department 100, Emma approves everything 0 to 1,000. Someone else, Tom, approves 1,001 cent and above. We can set up those tiers within a department. And then we'll see my operations department is someone completely different. This really eliminates the need to chase down those department managers. Instead, when they receive a bill for approval, they're going to receive an email link that says, hey, bill 123 is sitting out here for your approval. Click this link to go ahead and approve it. Not only do they have that email link, we can also set them up with a dashboard, as we saw, for our department managers. And maybe that dashboard lists all of the bills that are sitting out there for their approval. And the last thing I'll call out on those approvals is that folks also have mobile access to approvals. So if someone's unable to access their computer, but they have a smartphone or tablet, they can actually approve any AP bills, purchasing items, expense reports, timesheets, all from their mobile phone. Alrighty. Final piece of automation that I'll cover is AP automation and purchasing automation. So let me go ahead and jump into an environment here, and we will get into that. Alrighty. So within Intacct, I have the ability to utilize AP automation. So what that means is instead of manually creating a bill and adding it or importing an import template, I can actually upload or email a copy of the bill into the system. So I can click upload here. I'm going to go ahead and browse out to a PDF bill that I have on my desktop. I'll click create bill. And then I'm going to see that this is sitting out here and analyzing. And again, this is all within Intacct. So instead of having a third-party app where you do this, you can upload or email these bills directly into Intacct. The system will continue to analyze, and when it is eventually done analyzing it, it should just take a minute or two. We can actually take a look at what this does once it finishes analyzing, which is it gives us a side-by-side here. So I can see on the left what the system has guessed based on previous bills that have looked similar. So it's guessing the vendor, it's guessing the bill number, it's guessing the entry lines, the GL code, the location code, the amount, all based on previous bills that looked similar to this. So this functionality is really great once it reads more and more bills. At first, it's just learning, it doesn't know what it doesn't know. But as you start to submit similar bills, it's going to start understanding how to code these. And then on the right here, we're seeing that actual PDF of the bill that we submitted. Again, email works the same exact way. You'll be assigned an email address and you can forward these bills in instead of having to upload them manually. Let's jump into integrations now. And I guess just so everyone knows, there's also a PO integration or a PO automation, which allows you to create a purchase order and then later import a bill into the system, and it will match that bill to your original purchase order. So that's some great automation as well. We can certainly, if anyone wants to see that, we'll give some contact information at the end here, and we can follow up with some additional information on that. As far as integrations go, one great thing about Intacct is it's got open API. So we're able to integrate to pretty much anything. There's going to be what's called the Sage Intacct Marketplace, and this is a spot where we can see all of the Sage Intacct partners where there's already integrations built out. You'll see that this is actually filtered by industry and function. So maybe we're interested in what AP automation providers already have integrations. Here's a list of them: MineralTree, Tipalti, Stamply. Outside of these pre-built integrations, because of that open API, we're also able to build custom integrations. So we work with data blends, and we're able to, if we ever find a third party that isn't listed in this marketplace, we can connect Intacct to that third party utilizing something like data blend. That's where that open API is really great and really useful. One specific integration that I just want to highlight is the advanced CRM integration. So that's an integration that connects Intacct to Salesforce. And if we take a look at just one example of how this advanced CRM integration might work, we come out to my environment here. And then we'll wrap after this just to leave 5 minutes for questions. Okay. So with the advanced CRM integration, if anyone's familiar with Salesforce, we are able to create opportunities within Salesforce and sync those into Intacct. So I'd just like to show one example of this, just to get an idea of how great this integration can be. So what we're looking at here is an opportunity within Salesforce. It's an $800,000 opportunity. Once this opportunity is closed, once we have the advanced CRM integration set up, we're able to push opportunities into Intacct as whichever type of transaction we need them to be. So in this case, we previously took this opportunity in Salesforce and created a sales order in Intacct. So let me come out to here and take a look at the eventual sales order that was created. So we were able to push that opportunity into the order entry module. This is an $800,000 opportunity. And then what we can do from there, and what we've done in this particular scenario, is we actually took this sales order and converted it into an invoice, which we then sent out to this particular customer. So let's take a look at one of these invoices here. So we converted 400,000 of that original sales order into an AR invoice. Now, what's great about the integration is we're creating this invoice in Intacct, but a read-only copy of that invoice comes back into Salesforce. And so the folks that are just utilizing Salesforce are able to view the original sales order that was created and pushed into Intacct, but they're also able to view all the respective invoices along with any payment details if this has been paid. So in this particular case, this particular invoice was paid in Intacct on 7/18. The folks on the Salesforce side can see those payment details within Salesforce. So that's just one example of an integration. That's one of those pre-built integrations. But again, we can integrate to pretty much anything, whether it's on that marketplace and it's a partner of Intacct, or if it's another third party where we need to custom build an integration. And then just to wrap here, and then we'll leave 5 minutes for questions. We've covered audit trail kind of throughout the demo today, but just know that we can see an audit trail on any of our reports. We can see an audit trail on any transaction. So if I come into my general journal here, I'm able to see a detailed audit trail of who created this, any other actions they took after that point. And then I also have the ability to create custom reports to pull those audit trails in. So what I mean by that is if we take a look at just one of these, let's go audit. So audit trail by object. This is just a standard or a custom report that I could customize further if I need to. If we just take a look at what this looks like as of today, this is going to show me all of my activity on the 18th of March, who the user was that accessed the system, what they did, a link to that record, the date and time, the action they took. So this is fully configurable and customizable. We can rearrange this. We can add additional items to this particular audit trail, but it's really easy to just get that detail behind what happened and when it happened and who did it. I think we are at 1:40, so I'll go ahead and let me just jump back into my PowerPoint, and then we'll jump into any questions that folks have. Let's see here. Alrighty. So just to wrap here, we saw a few of these features throughout today's demo, but why Sage Intacct? Those consolidations and inter-entity features are huge. Those both also allow us to scale. So as we grow, as we acquire new entities, as we need to consolidate, we're able to do that easily within Intacct. We took a look at the real-time reporting and dashboarding. We talked a little bit on integrations, and then also that audit trail and compliance aspect is really important. With that said, in the last 4 minutes here, does anyone have questions? Okay, I see one in here. How about payroll service integrations? So I won't have time to show how that works, but we can certainly follow up with more information based on your specific payroll system. ADP definitely has an integration. Paychecks, I believe, does. Kayla, if you're still on, do you know if there's a page off the top of your head if there's a Paychecks integration? If not, Nancy, we can certainly get you more information on the two integrations behind those systems, Paychecks and ADP. I see one more in here about consolidations. So you can, I showed today USD consolidations, but you can also consolidate if you have multi-currency. So that's definitely, the global consolidations are also possible along with domestic consolidations. Are there versions of Intacct for specific industries? It's less that there's versions for specific industries and more that there's modules that specific industries might add. So for example, in consulting, there is a time and expense module. Most of our consulting clients will purchase that module and do time and expense out of Intacct. If we have a software company we're working with, there's a contracts module. They'll more likely than not add that contracts module. If we're working with a nonprofit, they'll probably add the grants tracking and billing module. So not really different versions of Intacct, but there are different add-on modules that certain industries will purchase. Great. Any other questions with 2 minutes to go? All righty. Well, thank you all for joining today. We really appreciate you taking the time out of your afternoon, and we hope to talk to some of you soon. Thank you all.